it's hard to imagine how the industry is surviving at this point, and in particular, hotels and restaurants, not just in the Philippines, but all over the world. When you think about it, travel bans in place, border closures, home and community quarantines, and of course, restrictions on social gatherings, it's really difficult to imagine how the industry is surviving at this point. So we've invited two industry insiders to share their views about the so-called new abnormal, or new normal as some people are calling it. We have with us Thomas Wenger. He's the Senior Vice President of the Enderun Hotels. Now, this is the group of hotels that manages hotels like the Midas Hotel and Casino, the Feliz Hotel in Boracay. We also have Mel Castro, the Assistant Dean of the College of Hospitality Management of Enderun Colleges. Now, this is a prestigious academic program in association with La Roche in Switzerland and the École Ducasse in France. All right, let's begin. So, Thomas, let's zone in on the hotel industry at this point. Let's start with your own group of hotels. How are you guys doing?
Generally speaking, in Manila, hotels are busy. There are 40–50% occupied, but it's always, how should I say, it's not a tourist or a guest-focused occupation. It's obviously all quarantines or BPO-based, fairly low ADRs. But in the end of the day, it keeps people busy, it keeps people in the job, and it basically keeps the operations running. And I think that at this point is important to at least make sure that people have a livelihood to be with, right? The properties in the provinces don't do that well, obviously. They're mostly closed. There's just no business to go around. And hopefully that will turn around sooner or later.
And what's next?
I think when we have to be honest with ourselves, we are looking at hopefully August, September, somehow getting some business back into the hotels. But if we really want to be realists, then we basically need to look at the last quarter. October, November, December, hopefully at that time business will need to come back a little bit. People need to do some business, factories need to work. Hopefully people will plan their first little trip within the Philippines. So therefore, we really look at the last quarter to see some kind of a meaningful occupancy. The rates will be lagging, but at least occupancy will come a little bit into it. And then the first quarter of next year. Let's not be anywhere illusionists and think that this will turn around within the next 2 months. It's not going to happen.
I'm very cautious. Why do you think it's going to take that long?
I think that we can forget about being in the 80s and 90s and having full house or whatever somewhere within this year. That won't be happening. But at least we will be able to have some kind of a meaningful occupancy that people can go back to work and people can make a regular income. These days, people basically either have no salaries, right, have been let go, or they're working on shortened weeks, so they have half salaries, 60%, 70%, whatever it might be. So I'm really looking at October, November, December to be maybe the new normal, right? And maybe having at least some meaningful returns or meaningful revenues within the hotels.
And it will probably begin with the business travelers. Leisure travelers will take much longer to return.
Yes, I agree. I mean, mostly, obviously, the city hotels will be most probably going to be busy earlier, right? And leisure hotels, Bohol, Boracay, Palawan, all these fantastic destinations we have will basically be a little bit later in the year. It is to be hoped that all Filipinos will spend their next trip within the Philippines in one of the destinations and basically turn around a little bit and help the colleagues in the hospitality industry a little bit out and basically get them busy rather than flying somewhere else for the sake of it.
The feeling of being secure, health security. When they go back to your hotels, will it be the exact same hotel, or will you be implementing certain health security protocols?
The hand wash stations, or rather the hand sanitizing stations, they will keep in place. There will be masks required on some places. Restaurants cannot have anymore the same seatings as it used to have. We probably don't see bigger banquets for a long time. Davao literally has put a ban on any gathering above 25 people for the rest of the year. So we will not have any weddings or socials or seminars or anything like that for a long time. We will need to make sure that we can build the consumers or guests' confidence. So we need to make sure that our staff knows what we're doing. We need to make sure that our rooms, that we can basically convey to the guest that their telephone, their L-safe, their minibar, their toiletries, everything has been just sanitized before they come. We will need to make sure that we can convey to the guest that we do everything possible for him to feel safe. Most of the hotels, they struggle with the size of the restaurant for breakfast. So we will need to find solutions around that basically buffets probably be out. We will certainly serve buffets for those who want, but you need to have that set menu option because people might just be scared of actually going to the buffet. And we as Filipinos, we love the buffets. So we have to probably rethink the whole approach massively all throughout. The concierge, which carries every luggage and touches every handle, needs to reinvent his process. We need to reinvent the check-in process, where basically everything needs to be sent ahead of time, including maybe a scanned copy of the passport. And in the end of the day, you just need to show the passport and get the credit card, and everything is already gone. Second steps then after that are obviously much more IT solutions, self-check-in solutions, all these kind of things, which basically need a little bit more money, need investments, and probably are a second step to follow, right?
Now, there are many things technology can do. I mean, the whole idea of human touch has been at the heart of hotels, right? When you say hospitality, it's about embracing guests. It's about, well, not literally, but it's about making them feel at home, welcome. And do we risk losing that human element because of all these restrictions?
I think that's a major point you're making here. We cannot lose that hospitality touch. We are people that deal with people on a daily basis. You need to welcome the guest as it was ever. But these times, you probably just need to do it with some restrictions in terms of spacing and everything else. That should not mean that you're less hard, showing less heart to the guest. It should not mean that you do less service. It should actually mean that you do more, but perhaps from a meter or a meter and a half apart, right? Perhaps the shaking hands is now off, and the Filipino touch on hand on the heart will be back in fashion a bit more often. Some hotels do that already, but there's also other. The Japanese, they bow for ages already, and that's their greeting. There are ways to do that, and there are ways to be just as sincere to serve, and that will be the challenge, to really make sure that that still comes across, and it's not just a computer hotel where basically a few security guards make sure that you're going the right way, right?
Hotels are all about the tactile experience, the way you touch the linens, the way you put your hand across the walls. And hotels spend on design. Hotels spend a lot of money on getting the right linens, the right carpets. Are we going to have to retrofit our hotels so that they become much more bare? I mean, well, help me understand what it's going to look like.
Well, it's probably not going to happen that fast, right? Ultimately, when you build a new hotel, you probably would look at some of these more solutions per se. Maybe you would have more tiles and maybe just little runners, which is easier to wash rather than shampooing a whole carpet, right? But I don't see any hotels now being able to rip that out. As I said before, we need to build the customers' confidence. We need to make sure that we can convey to the guest that this carpet has just been disinfected, that this linen has come just out of the linen store and is basically clean, UV tested, and so on. That we basically convey that our public spaces, elevator buttons, all these kind of things, handles, right, that they are basically within 20 minutes wiped, right? So we need to have people in housekeeping especially much more visible to actually do that job, which basically would convey to the guest, hey, they're really doing it. Hotels really need to look at all these things now. So when they actually go back and have guests of that they basically these things are in place, right? And main factor is also the staff needs to be trained. They need to know what the hotel is doing, and they need to be able to tell every guest, don't worry, sir, don't worry, mom, we're having just this done and we have this done. So basically that's how they convey the confidence to the guest, right?
Apart from avoiding contact with other people or avoiding contact with services, I mean, social distancing will continue to be practiced. And as you said, you probably might lose the whole MICE business for a while, meetings, the whole conventions, exhibitions. For a while, that's going to be gone. You probably have less occupancy. People will require more space around themselves. Will that mean an increase in the rates for hotels? Because you'll have much less guests. Are we going to see hotels become much more expensive than they ever were before?
You know, rates are always a matter of demand, right? As demand goes up, rates go up and hotels can ask more. I think we're going to be fine with rates for a long while because demand won't be that high. And basically that will keep the rates within check, right? I do see that if somebody has really the better answers to the new normal, that they actually can also charge a little bit of a premium for it, right? I can absolutely imagine that, right? But in generally speaking, I would say across all hotels, there will be not an increase. I would rather say a lagging of the average daily rates because the demand is not going to be there. How that's going to look in a year's time when demand hopefully comes back to previous years, that is obviously a different issue at that time.
Thank you, Thomas Wenger, SVP of Enderun Hotels. Okay, so now let's turn to Bel Castro, who is the Assistant Dean of the College of Hospitality, or the Hospitality College of Enderun Colleges. And, you know, Bel, we were just talking about the impact on the hotel side of the hospitality industry.
That's
I want to zone in on the restaurant or the F&B side, which is also your specialty. And really, how will hospitality, at least restaurant, F&B operations be impacted by this new normal?
There's the short term and there's the long term, right? So the short term is you're not allowed to operate anymore as we used to. And we've seen that already, and I think enough people have talked about it, how there's been a shift to delivery. The one that's that requires more study now is that once there is like in other provinces, a general quarantine, when there's a loosening up of restrictions, what will that restaurant look like? And then you have to ask yourself, which of these changes will be short term, and which of these changes will be long term, and which of these changes will be permanent? Because that will, of course, affect your fit out.
Eventually, Metro Manila will loosen up at one point. This is not going to be forever. Even the most pessimistic projections say that a few months down the road, it'll be like a general quarantine, not this extreme quarantine that we're having. So what will be the short-term changes that will be needed?
Well, the short-term changes, of course, is going to be, everybody knows the big term, social distancing. But exactly what does that mean? Fortunately for us, is the world is sharing so much information. If we just look at the WHO guideline, when restaurants do open, we're looking at 4 people maximum. That's what's going around. 4 people for 10 square meters for customers.
Okay,
yeah. Okay, so that will be a standard. We're looking at our new standards, right? So our new standard is 4 people for every 10 square meters, and every guest minimum 1 meter apart, and in a separate table 2 meters apart. So that's, but that's just the space. And then how do we? I expect governments all over the world to be establishing guidelines, but what we're seeing now is governments will only define the minimum. What's going to happen is the customer who's going to define what is safe for him. Yes. Okay. You know, there's no point in telling him and comply, right? So we have to look now at the whole sequence of service. Then we have to ask ourselves, where will this restaurant be? Where will this restaurant be? Because if before you were relying on walk-in guests. That's why you located in a mall. So now if your product mix is going to be some walk-in, but mostly delivery, where do you locate yourself now? Maybe not in a mall. And then you have to ask yourself also, how do I acquire my customer? Again, walk-in is nice facade and advertising, but if it's going to be mostly digital or even just 50-50, because I think that's going to stay, delivery will stay, then if you were not spending on digital before, you have to spend on digital now. And the other thing we're predicting also is that all the digital disruption things that existed pre-COVID, if there was any resistance to adoption then, you will see a ramp up and acceleration now. Before they said, oh, I don't want to be served by a robot. Really? Maybe now you do. Conveyors, maybe will not just be for sushi anymore. We'll start seeing it for other things.
My question now is, the way you describe the restaurant of the near future, I don't want to go to that restaurant. I mean, the whole point of dining out is it's an experience where you feel comfortable, you feel secure, you want to be close to your family. If I'm going to have to stand apart from my family, from my date, if I'm going to have to talk to a waiter who has got a mask in front of him, if I'm going to have to deal with all these restrictions and fear and anxiety, and I'd rather just stay home and take out or learn how to cook myself. Now that's a challenge because for restaurants to be relevant, they have to find that balance, right? Between making it hospitable at the same time safe.
We have talked about this, and and I've been talking to futurists, and it seems a little bit science fiction, but science fiction is a way of becoming science fact. So what are these futurists saying? Again, this is not me, but it's interesting. Say we might see the return of the old-fashioned speakeasy, supper clubs, because what are they doing now? They zap your temperature, and in Singapore, they make you fill out a health declaration. But what if I had a digital way of verifying that you are not exposed? It could be the same way we track people in marathons, that same chip could be on a phone or could be in something. And
I see where you're going. It's like technology will help ease those anxieties for dining out once again. But in terms of just the layout, the visuals, the environment inside a restaurant, I mean, are we saying goodbye to that whole warmth, that whole physical touch, that human touch? You want to touch the china, the silverware. We're saying goodbye to all that?
No, the restaurant will not go away. I think the future is going to be built on trust and transparency. So a lot of the things that have to happen are things you cannot see. HEPA filters, maybe UVC lights. Maybe now, I don't see this in restaurants, but now waiters need to have a decent locker room where they can actually remove their clothes, put on proper clothes. Maybe they will have sanitation booths. Maybe now they really need to be certified. You need to know that he took ServSafe training and that he's been retooled. Maybe we will have cameras in the kitchen so you can see the chefs. Maybe you will see all sorts of declarations, and this is our handling. My Facebook page will show you how we receive the food, how we handle the food.
But on a more practical note, I want to backtrack to what Thomas was talking about, because you also are an expert in hotel operations, and hotels have their own F&B outlets.
Yes,
that could be much more difficult because these are huge spaces. I mean, hotels do wedding banquets, they do conventions, and of course, in the Philippines, at least, the buffet model is like very popular. How do you even replace that, or how do you manage that? The scale that we used to be familiar with, and kind of balance it out with the new requirements of transparency, trust, social distancing, and all that.
Maybe the buffet never comes back. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's live action. Yeah, it'll be. I think you'll still have the pay one price, eat everything. I think that's what you will have. What you will not have is serve yourself dishes. The live action stations, maybe cold cases, and space.
Sadly, there's a cost to transparency and trust. It's an increase in investment and passed on to consumers. So we're going to go back to the old days, I suppose, when dining was a luxury.
Again, it goes back to trust, and trust is a direct correlation of fear. So I don't think the
Wow.
carinderia is going anywhere because those people will not be afraid. I think street food actually, if done properly, it'll explode because people
It's been a risk.
yeah.
Street food has been a risk from the very beginning. So what's another risk? Yeah, okay.
What's another
I get
risk,
that.
right? But actually, a salad bar that's uncovered in a 5-star restaurant, for me, introduces more food risk than the isaw that came straight off the charcoal.
You know, we restaurateurs, hospitality professionals will think twice about investing on all these changes, thinking that by the time we put things in place, who knows, maybe this pandemic is over. Maybe a vaccine is found. Regardless of what the scientists are saying, it's like people are reluctant to make all these drastic changes. I guess, let's put it this way. Are these changes relevant regardless of a pandemic? Meaning it could be some other uncertainty in the future. Because if we're just doing all this specifically to respond to one particular virus, it may not sound cost effective to a lot of people.
Every student that enters the hospitality classroom is required to take, in his freshman year, he's required to take risk management of sanitation, hygiene, and safety. Okay? And you've traveled enough, so you've seen that these are global standards, and it is adopted at varying degrees of compliance all over the world. Mm-hmm. I think moving into even the next 6 months, maybe we don't have to do the exaggerated idea of having a sanitation booth for our staff, but I think it's time that we took these global standards seriously. You know, of the hygiene standards and the grooming standards that already exist. That'd be nice to see here.
Thank you so much. That was Bel Castro, along with Thomas Wenger, both from the Enderun group, speaking to us about the so-called new normal in the hospitality industry. After the break, we'll talk to another industry insider, restaurateur and chef, Margarita Flores. ANC Conversations returns after the break.